a stretch of water so narrow you could almost mistake it for a river on a map, yet powerful enough to shake the entire global economy in a matter of hours. That's the Strait of Hormuz, and right now, something about it feels different. Not louder, not officially worse, just tighter, more watched, more calculated, every movement tracked, every signal analyzed. Every ship that passes through it isn't just carrying oil, it's carrying risk. And here's the part most people don't realize. It doesn't take a war to disrupt this place. It doesn't take a full-scale conflict. Sometimes, it only takes one mistake, one misread radar signal, one drone that flies a little too close, one captain who hesitates half a second too long. And suddenly, a narrow passage becomes a global pressure point, because this isn't just a regional corridor. This is where over 20 million barrels of oil pass every single day. That's more than 20% of the world's total supply. In simple terms, 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil on Earth depends on this single route staying open. Now imagine what happens if it doesn't. Not for months, not for weeks, just 72 hours, 3 days. Analysts say prices could jump 20 or even 30% almost instantly. And that's not a distant headline. That's fuel prices, food prices, shipping costs, everything rising together. So the real question isn't whether Hormuz matters. The real question is, how close are we to a moment where it stops working the way we expect? Look closer at the map, and it becomes even more unsettling. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is just 21 miles wide. But ships don't get all 21 miles. Because of international traffic rules, they are funneled into lanes barely 2 miles across. 2 miles! That's all a supertanker carrying billions of dollars worth of cargo gets to navigate through one of the most heavily monitored zones on the planet. Think about that for a second. Massive vessels, moving slowly, unable to maneuver freely, surrounded by radar systems, patrol boats, drones, and missile installations watching from both sides. It's not just a shipping lane, it's a corridor under constant observation. And over 80% of the oil passing through it is heading straight to Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea. Entire economies quietly depend on this narrow passage functioning without interruption. Pipelines were supposed to be the backup plan. But reality tells a different story. Even at full capacity, alternative routes can only handle a fraction of what Hormuz carries every day. And pipelines don't move everything. Food, electronics, machinery. All of it still relies on ships passing through this same bottleneck, which means the system doesn't really have a backup. It has a partial workaround at best. And when a system this critical has no true replacement, even small disruptions start to feel much bigger than they should. Now bring Dubai into the picture. The skyline, the ports, the luxury, the illusion of perfect stability. It all looks self-contained, almost insulated from the chaos of the world. But it isn't. Because behind that image, Dubai is deeply connected to this narrow strip of water. Take Jebel Ali Port, one of the largest and most advanced ports in the world, a logistics hub connecting over 150 cities globally. Where everything flows through it. Cars, electronics, consumer goods. But every single container ship that reaches Jebel Ali has to pass through Hormuz first. There's no alternative route, no shortcut, which means the entire system operates on a single assumption, that this corridor stays open. Now layer in another reality. The UAE imports around 90% of its food. Most of it arrives by sea, through the same route. So it's not just about oil, it's about survival. If ships slow down, shelves feel it. If insurance costs rise, prices follow. If risk increases, confidence starts to slip. And in a city built on global perception, confidence is everything. Because once people begin to question stability, the effects don't stay contained. They spread, quietly, gradually, until they become impossible to ignore. And right now, the pressure inside this corridor isn't theoretical, it's visible. Military presence has intensified, surveillance has become constant, patrol boats operate closer than ever to commercial vessels, live fire drills are happening near active shipping lanes, and then there's the technology. Swarm tactics, fast attack boats moving in coordinated groups, drones that cost a fraction of traditional weapons but can still disable critical parts of massive ships, smart mines that detect specific acoustic signatures. This isn't old warfare, it's something faster, cheaper, harder to predict, and much more difficult to defend against, because traditional defense systems were designed for large, visible threats. not dozens of small, fast-moving targets approaching simultaneously. And that changes the equation. Because now, the risk isn't just about large-scale conflict. It's about unpredictability, about scenarios that don't escalate gradually, but happen instantly. And when shipping companies start factoring that in, behavior changes, routes get adjusted, delays increase, costs rise, and eventually those costs reach consumers. Quietly at first, then all at once. Insurance companies have already started reacting. War risk premiums have surged, not based on technical data, but on geopolitical tension, which means every ship entering Hormuz carries an additional invisible cost, a fear premium. And that premium doesn't stay in the shipping industry. It moves outward, into fuel prices, into retail costs, into global supply chains, because when transportation becomes uncertain, everything built on top of it becomes unstable too. Some companies are already considering longer routes, sailing around Africa instead of through the Gulf. But that adds thousands of miles, more fuel, more time, higher costs, which again feeds back into the system. It's a loop, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. Globally, the impact is even more complex. Asia depends heavily on this corridor. China imports massive volumes of oil through Hormuz. Japan and South Korea rely on it for nearly all their energy needs. India's growth trajectory is tied to stable energy access. So if Hormuz slows down, it's not just a regional issue. It's a global shock. Oil prices rise, production costs increase, inflation follows, and suddenly, what started as a localized disruption becomes a worldwide economic event. And here's something most people don't connect immediately. The tech world is tied to this too. Data centers, AI infrastructure, massive computing facilities being built across the Gulf. They require enormous amounts of energy, and much of that energy still comes from oil and gas. So, if supply chains are disrupted, it doesn't just affect transportation or manufacturing. It affects data, processing, the digital systems we depend on every day, which means this narrow strait isn't just moving oil anymore. It's indirectly supporting the infrastructure of the modern digital world. Efforts to bypass Hormuz exist. Pipelines like the UAE's route to Fujairah, Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline to the Red Sea, but none of them fully replace the strait. Combined, they cover only about 40% of the total volume. The rest still depends on ships, still depends on that narrow corridor staying open. And even those alternatives have their own vulnerabilities. New bottlenecks, new risks, which means the system doesn't escape pressure, it just shifts it somewhere else. And when every alternative carries its own uncertainty, the original problem never really disappears. What makes this even more unsettling is the contrast, because if you visit Hormuz Island, it looks like something out of a dream. Red beaches, turquoise water, landscapes that feel untouched. But beneath that beauty, there's something else. Surveillance systems, hidden installations, strategic positions. The same land that attracts photographers also serves as a monitoring point for one of the most sensitive corridors in the world. On the other side, the Musandam Peninsula offers breathtaking views, deep fjords, calm waters. But even there, patrol boats move quietly. And sensors track activity below the surface, and what once felt peaceful now carries an undercurrent of tension. It's subtle, but it's there. And in the middle of all this, there's Oman, a country playing a quiet but critical role. The main shipping lanes actually pass through its waters, which makes it a gatekeeper. Not loudly, not aggressively, but strategically. Its policy of neutrality helps maintain balance, helps prevent escalation. But even that balance feels fragile, because diplomacy can only go so far when tensions are constantly shifting, when trust is limited, when every side is watching, waiting, calculating. So when you step back and look at the full picture, something becomes clear. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping route, it's a pressure point holding together multiple systems at once. Energy, trade, technology, and food supply, all connected, all dependent, and all vulnerable to disruption from something as small as a single miscalculation. Which brings us back to the question that started this. Not whether Hormuz matters, not whether it's important, but how long this balance can actually hold. Because in a system this tight, this exposed, this critical instability isn't guaranteed. It's maintained, carefully, constantly, and sometimes all it takes is one moment for everything to shift. And when you look at it from that perspective, the question becomes harder to ignore. Not what is happening right now, but what could happen next. Because everything still appears to be functioning. Ships are moving, oil is flowing, markets are holding. But beneath that surface, the pressure hasn't disappeared. It's building, quietly, constantly. And history has shown us that systems like this don't always fail slowly. Sometimes they shift all at once. If this gave you a different way of seeing what's really happening behind the headlines, stay connected. There's always more beneath the surface, and we'll keep uncovering it. Share your thoughts in the comments, because perspectives matter here more than ever. And if you want more deep, reality-focused breakdowns like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones unfolding quietly, right in front of us.